Very well, Kylie. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on the Leadership Lounge tonight. We are missing one very special person, and that is Andrew. Andrew's not able to make it tonight. So Andrew's missing tonight, but you are going to be, you're going to make up for both of him. Okay.
Right.
So so Tony, Andrew and I started this leadership lounge probably about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer actually. It was probably nearly close to a year ago actually, as I think about it. And we started this lounge because we felt that there were so many leaders that were put into a leadership position because they're great technicians, great practitioners, great at what they do, but no one actually has ever shown them how to be a leader, right? No one's shown them what are the competencies, what are the qualities, what are the skills leaders need. And if we know by research, there's about 26 different competencies that leaders need that no one has ever generally showed them unless you've done an MBA or unless you've done some further studies around leadership. And we said, why don't we get on each fortnight and we start to share some insights and practical tools and practical applications around how to help leaders in this journey, because leadership is a journey. Don't you reckon?
Absolutely. I mean, you've just hit it on the head there. There's a massive gap between theory and actually practically applying theory.
Yeah.
And that's even if you've learned, you've done your MBAs. I did a master's in business leadership, which
Yeah.
was practically applying this. But there is so much that needs to be educated and going through the coaching like you're doing with Andrew from
Yeah.
that side, Kylie.
Yeah.
And this is where we see that massive gap in all different leadership levels. It's just a question of that there's nobody's ever actually shown them, how to practically apply this. And I think this is where things like this add significant value.
It does. It does. And look, we've known each other. You've got a really extensive financial services background. I've got a great bio on you, but I've known you for probably close to 15 years. You are an
Yeah,
award. It's probably been that long, hasn't it? You
it
are an
has.
award-winning financial services leader. You have transformed culture, and that's what I want to talk about today because, I think this is where we often see companies struggling with that word culture. Like, what does that mean? What does that, in practical terms, what do I need to do in order to do that? You've transformed cultures. You've been not only in Australia, but also worldwide as well. You've been recognised for your contributions and achievements. You've been nominated for several awards across leadership, culture, compliance. I know that is your jam as well. Fintech and organisational change, right? So I'm so looking forward to hearing from you around, culture. And I think the one part for me is, how do companies shift cultures? How do we shift cultures? How do we influence people? Because we know that in order to get change, in order to shift a culture, it's the people that do it, right? It's a bit like,
Yep.
culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have the best strategy, but if you don't have the right culture, we actually don't get the right outcomes. So you were talking to me recently around 3 powerful strategies for influencing and shaping culture. But before we get into those strategies, tell me a little bit about how you define culture.
Yeah, culture for me, when you actually look at culture, it's absolutely for me, it's absolutely influencing the people to make sure that they fit within the organizational framework,
Yeah.
but you improve their quality of life as well. And I probably talk a little bit, and I'm going into things like servant leadership, etc., on that side of
Yeah.
things. But one of the things that I look at culture, and culture is made up when you ask anybody, what does culture mean? How do you influence culture in the business? There are subsets of culture, and
Yeah.
that's the learning journey that we find is really, really difficult for anyone from CEOs right through an organization, because you can put a culture and framework in place, which most organizations do.
Yeah.
But
Well,
what are the factors that actually influence it, and how do you practically start to bring that framework alive? And this is the struggle that most organizations have, because culture is massive. And
yeah.
I'm going to go a little bit deeper and say, well, if you're looking to influence the culture, that means influencing the people in the business to actually make sure that you've built that environment where everybody has that sense of participative safety. And that brings the piece in where, you know, when you join a business, you've got your own DNA, your own values, your own self-identity.
Your own behaviors,
and that self-identity merges with the organization's social identity. So what you've done is you've formed this marriage.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, as the business goes and they make decisions, and we're going into organizational change now, you're starting to actually influence the culture from the organization with some of the decisions. But remember, the individual have got their own self-identity. So making sure you get this right, and that comes into other aspects of things like emotional intelligence, strategic management, is absolutely crucial for leaders. And this is where coaches like yourself and Andrew are worth their weight in gold, Kylie, because you need to understand exactly what you're doing and some of the processes and steps in order to actually understand what culture is, first of all.
Yeah.
And if you ask that in any senior leadership team meeting, what is culture? What actually are the subsets of culture that influences culture in an organization? See what you get back. And that's when you can actually start to judge and assess how the culture is in your business and how much you are influencing that in a business or organization.
I bet you would also, Tony, get a lot of different responses as well from that. You know what I mean? Like, I think they would all have their own interpretation or belief or even understanding of what culture is. And therefore, if there's this mix of who are we and how do we create culture, and if I think of culture this way and you think of culture this way, then how do they come together, like you say?
Absolutely.
They don't. And I think that's where you see, well, I certainly see in organizations where they have a very siloed approach. So they actually have a culture within a culture, right? Because they're actually just creating their own culture because they actually don't know how to create the culture around it. And it's the frameworks and the tools and the rigor that you have around some of those things.
You're absolutely spot on, Kylie. I think when you actually, and I'm potentially going into some of the DNA of a journey that you take, not just CEOs on, but everybody in the business. When the CEO understands things like ethics, ethical theory, ethical decision making, leadership, emotional intelligence, then there's also
safety.
Strategic management, emotional, organizational change strategy. Once you start to build them on the cultural piece, so what is culture? What is ethics? What is ethical theory? How do you make an ethical decision in an organization? How do you actually understand the people's thoughts and feelings and emotions in a business of those people so that you know that you can make or you can assess what you're doing or the impacts or consequences when you're making a decision? And then that falls into then when you're making that decision, the organizational change journey and the strategic management. Are you empowering those people in the organization to help you influence the business and help shape the business for the future, which is then taking everybody on a journey where not just at the CEO level, but everywhere throughout the business, they're learning about ethics, they're learning about ethical theory. They're actually building this into their own DNA and self-identity, where they can then understand, wait a minute, how do I make an ethical decision? How do I start to actually become a better leader with the leadership styles, etc.? And then how can I practically apply that from the frameworks that we have in place? And that gap is absolutely massive, because if you start to understand the culture and what influences culture and the subsets of like ethical theory, ethics, leadership, emotional intelligence, and then all the other little pieces, you start then to become an exceptional leader, and then you can start to transfer that to everybody else in your business, and then it becomes this exciting business. As we had at Elders, Elders Financial Planning in Australia, 35% net promoter score for ethics and the cultural aspects of the business, and we turned it into a 91% net promoter score within 12 months because we empowered the people and we took them on a journey where they felt that they were part of this social identity with the business, and
Yes.
they were helping shape the future of the business. And that's when there's a buzz. There's this exciting buzz in the culture where everybody wants to do the same thing, and that impacts not just the people in a positive way, but the profits, as like some of the business ethics theorists, Buchanan, Boatwright. If you can get the cultural right, the profits absolutely fly from the business.
Yes, yes, of course. So as I hear you say that, and I think this is just a reminder for everyone in the audience, culture takes time, right? We can't just go, right, this is our culture, these are our values, these are our beliefs, these are our behaviors, these are, how we make decisions, this is how we, how we develop strategy, all those types of things. It takes time, doesn't it? And I often find that, and even at the executive level and that senior leadership level, they've got to there because they're really good strategically, or they're smart people. They know how to. They're great technicians. But it really is those pillars that help leaders to develop that culture. And so often they don't know how to do that, right? So, one of the things that you shared with me is that there was 3 powerful strategies for influence and shaping culture. So what's the first one? What do the people need to do? What do the organizations need to do as a first step in order to start to influence and shape culture?
I think one of the biggest things that and it's absolutely apparent in Australian newspapers at the moment, but worldwide as well, is ethics, ethical theory. If you ask anybody to say, tell me about ethics, tell me about ethical theory and how I can apply this theory and ethical decision making in an organization, there's so much ethical theory that takes people on a journey. And I did this with my leadership team in many organizations where I go through and teach them about ethical theory. So Immanuel Kant, Kantian approach to ethical theory, which is your duty or moral maxim to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And then there's Jeremy Bentham on the utilitarian approach to ethical theory, which is, for the good of all. So when you make a decision, for the good of all. And I amalgamated this at Elders Financial Planning to create this Kantian utilitarian approach to ethical theory and ethical decision making, where it was your moral maxim to make a decision as your duty for the good of all.
For the good of all, yes.
So my whole leadership team went through this training where they actually learned from myself about how to understand the consequences, the impact of an ethical decision making process. So I would take them through and talk to them about why we're looking at this, why we're actually looking at the ethical theory, so that they started to understand a little bit more about some of them themselves as leaders. They understood what could influence culture in the business. And they started to actually, as they learned this, they started to increase their awareness of ethics and how it can influence culture in the business. And they started to become better leaders in themselves, because then when they started making decisions, financial decisions in the business or decisions across the business, they're actually looking at an ethical decision-making process like Trevino Nelson's 8 steps, in order to actually make a decision that was their duty to make the right decision for the good of all. And I think that approach then started to look more at, wait a minute, we're actually now starting to become that social identity where we're working with the people in the business. And you felt that there was more of a lateral leadership piece here instead of a hierarchical piece, because we were treating people when I came into the business as employees and numbers. And then all of a sudden, you've got a complete change in this organization where there's a buzz, where you're starting to treat people as equals. You're getting them involved in the strategy side and helping to shape the future of the business. But you were supporting them and helping them to become better people. And that was transferring some things like the ethics, the theory, why we were doing this, and then the ethical decision making. It was starting to transfer right through the organization. And then people felt that, and they could see that there was a change in your leadership team. And that was flowing right the way through the business. And that was the start of one of the biggest parts of some of the changes. And you unconsciously know about this when you do this in an organization. I was quite lucky that I understood from the Masters in Business Leadership how to physically apply this. But the change in my leadership teams in all the organizations I've been in has been incredible, which some of the guys said I didn't realize what leadership and ethics was until I'd met Tony, and then I become a better leader from it. But I think that's the first big one, to understand, how do you actually apply ethics, ethical theory, then take you on a journey as a leader. And it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're a leader or an employee in an organization, you'll bring in and you're practically applying those set of values that are actually embedded in your framework. And for the first time, you're taking people on a journey. And that's even new recruits. We don't ask new recruits about ethics or culture, and we don't put that in place for new recruits so that we can actually help them go on that journey and become embedded into a highly ethical cultural organization.
Yeah, I love that, because so you said there was an ethical model that a company could apply in that space. Is that right? So there's some models there that they can use. What's your favorite model in that space? Who would you recommend?
I mean, for myself, I there's so many different ethical theories from that side of things, but virtue ethics. But I applied a Kantian and utilitarian approach, and I modeled them together and made my own model, so that there was a very easy and quick ethical decision-making process. So when we had any organization decision, we would overlay this very quick model of ethical theory and ethical decision-making to go, right, now let's look at the impacted parties. We're going to do a strategy. We're going to do an organizational change in the business, going to make a decision. Now let's actually look at the impact, the consequences of any change. And if we have to, bring in the subject matter experts, that's the people that are actually going to be impacted by the change, and actually go through this and bring them into the strategic planning process, the planning, formulation and implementation, so they become the advocate of the change process as well.
For sure, yeah.
And that's where the subsets of the organizational change, strategic management comes in.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden you just empowered everybody in the business. And it can be as simple as that. Yeah. But you have to take people on that journey first of all, so that they truly understand ethics, ethical theory, ethical decision making.
Yeah.
And then once they understand that, they can use those tools then in order to start influencing the people around them. And all of a sudden you start seeing them change as leaders as well.
Yeah.
And that's a piece.
Well, I think the thing that I think is the takeout for me in that first pillar is doing the right thing for the good of all, right? So that's our kind of our compass, isn't it? Right? It's our compass to go, right, is our change, is our strategy, is our decisions, is our whatever it is for the good of all, right? So it kind of allows people to just come back and do that. When I'm working with teams, one of the things that I'm always saying is that we have to remember as a team that when we interact, when we communicate, when we challenge, when we create conflict within teams, which we absolutely want, it has to be for the good intention for the team, right? So the reason we're challenging, conflicting, or making decisions, or having these robust conversations at this level, it's because it's for the good of the team, right? Not because I just don't like you, not because I just don't think your decision's good or your reasonings, but it's because of the good. So I love that as being the anchor point. What's number 2?
Leadership. It all falls and aligns because you're understanding ethical theory, you're understanding making ethical decisions, and then understanding leadership and the different styles of leadership from that side of it, so that you can apply this in a much more practical sense from that side. So, understanding situational leadership, the directing, the coaching, the supporting, the delegating, the transformational leadership with the different 4 I's, ideal, influence, inspirational, motivation. Then there's the transactional leadership style. And also, which I believe is one of the final pieces on your leadership journey, is servant leadership.
Yeah.
And then actually
Yes.
giving back to others in order to make sure that you create an environment where you're actually supporting other people to be the best they can be.
You
And a
too.
classic example of that is elders. I actually volunteered, and it was a volunteering. Everybody in my senior leadership team, if they would like to go on an emotional intelligence course, which is the third powerful piece on that side. And they went on the course and they absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
And I think that's the pieces on leadership and leadership, understanding the different leadership styles, because some leadership styles, and I've been on training courses where you'll get situational leadership, which sometimes isn't there. You have to understand all the different leadership styles
Of
and be able.
course.
So I think the leadership part is massive, because you're going on this journey that's actually learning about ethical theory, learning about ethical decisions, learning about leadership and how to apply this in an ethical manner. And it's changing your DNA as a leader at
Yeah.
the same time as you're going through this
Yeah.
whole journey.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because, it's the leaders that will guide us to that North Star. They'll take us there or they won't, right?
Absolutely.
I'm extremely passionate about emotional intelligence. I did so much studies on emotional intelligence when Andrew and I actually did our org psych degree together, right? About, oh gosh, a long time ago, 2001, finished in 2006 together. And part of that, EQ was only just coming out, right? It was in the 1990s that EQ actually, we were starting to see some theories around what is it? Does it make us, are we better because of EQ? Is it more determinant of success than IQ, which we know it absolutely is for a certain cohort? So to me, and I train also leaders on EQ, not only to develop their own EQ, but also to develop their people around EQ, right? We know now how critically important EQ is to the success of organisations. It helps us retain staff. People actually want to work for leaders that have got a higher EQ. And there's research out there that says the higher your EQ, the more money you'll get paid. And the fun thing about EQ, or the interesting thing about EQ, is it actually is a learned skill. So just like leadership, it's a learned skill, right?
Absolutely.
IQ, we're born with it, right? And we might have some movement from top and bottom, but it's pretty stable. But EQ's not. You can actually develop in EQ.
I think that was the great thing, Kylie. I've got a great saying, and I've copyrighted it. But you really need to understand the thoughts, feelings, emotions of the people around you.
Yeah.
And as a leader, that's the big, should we say, turning point in your leadership career, is understanding the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of the people around you, especially when you're going to say something or make a decision or announce something or talk to your team. You need to understand their thought and embrace some of the resistance from that side of it, if there is resistance. Because once you do that, then all of a sudden you really do start to become an EI leader, where they then start to understand you as a leader, and they start to see that the way that you're talking, the way that you're interacting with them is authentic, and you're really caring about them, and you're being passionate, and you're making sure that you do care about their thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And a classic example is, sometimes I used to go around the office and I'll see somebody who's having a bad day, and I'd walk away, I'd go to the shop, buy a packet of sweets and put it on the table and walk past them. And I think they're the bits in emotional intelligence, is sometimes as a leader, you look around you, you see the people around you, and you see, you pick up on their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, because that means that you're receptive as a leader to them, and you understand and you're in tune with some of the things that actually create and keep that social identity intact in the business. Because the biggest impacts for like organizational change, as you're aware, is the fact that, if you make a decision and you haven't brought the specialists in and empowered them into the business as part of that strategic planning, then you can lose them. You can lose people in the business because you make decisions without actually empowering.
Yeah, well, gosh, we could go on all night, but I'm conscious of time. But I do want to say something about that, right? Because I think, what we do know around change is that people don't mind change. What they don't like is when change is done to them, not with them. So what you're really saying there is, how do we as leaders use our emotional intelligence in order to bring people along that journey with us, to get them on the bus, right? Because if they're not
Absolutely.
on the bus, then we don't get that cultural shift. We actually don't get the results that we hope to get, or actually people lose faith in us too as well, don't they?
I think that you're absolutely spot on, Kylie. One of the things that I noticed from the organizational change lectures that I do is the fact that we make a decision, but we don't understand, a bit like Enron and some of the big disasters that happened from many years ago, is
Yeah.
you make an organizational decision, but you don't know the impacts, consequences of that decision right at the bottom level, but you've
Right.
not engaged those people into
Just
the
made a decision. Yeah.
yeah, the planning, the formulation, or the implementation. And
Yeah.
especially the implementation part is they're absolutely advocates of change if you embrace some of their knowledge. And that comes into the diversity and the empowerment on that side of everybody's got a richness of ideas. And your job as a leader is to absolutely extract that richness of ideas so that you get
Yeah.
that diversity in the business. And I think that's where the leadership, the emotional intelligence, the ethics, the ethical theory, the ethical decision making, it all comes together to take the person or leader
On a
on a
journey.
journey that
Yeah.
really gives them an insight into their own identity and DNA.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's not companies that don't change, it's the people, right? And we've seen failed organizations. There's so much research out there around failed organizations where the company either didn't make the right decision or they didn't bring the people along with them. So is your third one emotional intelligence?
It is. Yeah. Emotional intelligence is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I love
Because
it.
if you're a leader, you have to understand the impact of any organizational decision that you make. And making sure that you understand the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of people. That is absolutely crucial because, if you don't, then are you really understanding your people in your business? Because that's something that I've done in many businesses is when you get there and you understand the people, you understand their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, then all of a sudden you've started to become this leader that is helping and empowering people,
Yeah,
not just to
yeah,
better themselves personally, because you've gone on this leadership journey, but you're also empowering them to help shape the future of the business. And to me, it sometimes can be lost in a business because we're all so busy that a classic example was at Elders Financial Planning, where I brought the self-employed financial planners into a meeting with a subcontract power planning company and
yeah,
said, I would like you to interview the CEO of the power planning company because we're looking to help support you. And they'd never had this before. So what I
yeah.
was doing is getting them, the subject matter experts, to
Help make the decision.
and all of a
Excellent.
sudden overnight there was this richness of ideas that came into the business from all sorts of different people at any
Yeah,
level. And all of a sudden you started to influence because everybody felt wanted, needed, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
yeah, yeah,
comfort, that security. But they felt there was a person in that business that absolutely, in an authentic leadership manner, wanted to do the best for them and absolutely make sure that they were doing the best for them and making sure that they not just grew the business, they grew the profits, but the culture become electric. And it was this inclusive culture where everybody felt excited of what was going to happen for the future. And I think that's the bits that you can get to in a stage with emotional intelligence and embedding that into your leadership team for the future is you get this buzz of excitement where for the first time ever, you've got these leaders in a business where they're empowering people through ethics, ethical theory, emotional intelligence, leadership,
yeah,
and all of a sudden, everybody in that business can actually see this because it's flowing through the business, not just with the existing staff, but also you, through your frameworks, you put this in place with new staff so you understand where they are in their journey, and then you can actually apply these pieces in order to actually get them up to speed as well, so they can transfer that knowledge to others. And all of a sudden, you've got this thing that just spreads like a plague of excitement and an inclusive culture. And it improves the profits massively. In Elders, we had a projected 1.6 million loss in the first year that went to a 300,000 profit because productivity went up 20%. It was just one of those things that you just empowered everybody in the organization, and they knew that you were absolutely authentic in the way that you wanted not just the business to achieve, but them personally, things like ethical, scholarships, education scholarships, things like that. I think those three factors are absolutely crucial. And you're not forgetting, obviously, your organizational change, your strategic management, etc.
Yes.
I think this is the bits that are absolutely crucial for coaches like yourself and Andrew and what you do. That's how a lot of businesses will really maximize, not just the profits, but the people in the business, and they retain the staff because they want to be followers of a leader that is absolutely ethical.
Yes. So I'll ask one final question, and then Andrew always has a questions that he asks guests at the end, so I'll ask that in a moment. But why do you think then, and I've got my thoughts and opinions, but why do you think so many companies don't get this bit right?
They don't know what they don't know. It's almost this piece, in a sense, it's a bit like the how to practically apply. And in many organizations that I've been in, they build the framework, they have the ethical charter, etc. But how do you practically apply this? And you only know what you know. So taking somebody on a journey that starts them right from the start and saying, let's actually talk about how you're going to influence culture. Let's talk about ethical theory. Let's talk about why you would look at this, moral maxims on the Kantian approach, the egalitarian approach, virtue ethics, and then taking them on a journey where they're learning how to become more ethical, better leaders, but they're understanding all the knowledge behind this.
Why and how.
Absolutely. And then practically applying this into an ethical framework where for the first time, you'll not throwing something out as a quick quiz on ethics, etc., a bit like Christmas trees that are put out and then put away 4 weeks ago, 4 weeks afterwards. You're actually practically applying this through the business so that people actually are starting to adopt the theory, the practice, the application. And that's where you start to become this servant leader, because you're giving back to your people in order to make them the best that they can possibly be. And that flows through a business rapidly through a business, because they can see that you're absolutely genuine in your ambition to do the best for them.
Yeah, when I hear you talk, I think of Keith Abraham's a wonderful mentor of mine and an amazing person. And he always says, when the whys become clear, the hows become easy, right? So when the whys become clear, why are we doing this ethics? Why are we doing the leadership? Why do we want to develop that emotional intelligence? Why? Simon Sinek talks about that. But then the hows become clear, right? Because now we just need to know how. Our leadership program, so we run a leadership program, a people leadership program that is, yes, it's based on theory, because there's so many models and tools and resources that you can get out there that have been around leadership for decades, right? And you would know this. But what we teach them is the practical. How do you lead people? How do you manage underperformance? How do you lead change? How do you provide feedback that's motivational and inspirational? How do you develop a culture of accountability? It's the how, isn't it, right? So when you say, why don't people do it? Well, they don't know how, or actually they assume they can do it themselves, or it might evolve themselves, as opposed to bringing in people that have actually got experience and the tools and resources to do it. Hey.
It's a frightening gap when you actually see that across many different industries, not just financial services.
Of course,
but if you do this and you go through coaching courses and learn this, all of a sudden you become a much better leader, and it flows through the business, as I found with my senior.
Confident. And the
Yeah,
impact on that is engagement, happy employees, loyal employees, retention, happier customers, increased profits, increased productivity. I could just continue to go on, right? When we get that bit right with the people, the results flow.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The results flow. So Andrew would normally ask this question, the final question. He would say, right, we've got to the end, and what is the one thing that you wish you had said that you haven't yet had a chance to say? So what's the one thing that you want, if I just had to leave them on this note, what would it be?
I think the one thing I would say, always be authentic in what you do and how you do this, and be honest with people, whether it's a difficult decision or not. Always be authentic in your style of communication. And I'd probably go on to say, learn more about the culture, learn more about ethics, learn more about ethical decision making. Even if you just learn that bit, these are bits that really will help you increase your skill set, your leadership. Talk to people like yourself and Andrew, Kylie, and make sure that you become a better leader, because then all of a sudden, once you get it, and you do, this light bulb moment comes on and you're going, wow, you want to actually give back to other people and become a servant leader. And you get this buzz of excitement when you start to see them saying, I've got this successful business now, this is brilliant. And they become, great leaders in their own right, where people want to work for them, because they've created this environment of participative safety and are a brilliant leader from that side. So it's it is the leadership journey that is never ending.
That's right. And I always say leadership is a journey. It's not a destination. So I don't care how long you've been in leadership, leadership has changed. Leadership will continue to change. I started in the industry when it was very much a command and control. You do what you say, you do what I say, and that's it. And it was very much like that. Whereas we know now that people are wanting leaders that are collaborative, leaders that are empathetic, leaders that are calm, leaders that are, that visionary and supportive, right? And also, I think the important point to remember, and I say it as much as I can get airtime around this, is for the first time in history, we're going to be leading 4 generations, right? And those generations want and expect something different from us as a leader. And if we don't give it to them, they will find someone else that will, because there are amazing leaders out there. So we can no longer just hope that we get people to stay with us because we offer them good pay, or we offer them a flexible work environment, or we offer them, a 9-day week, right? They want more from their leaders, and they will find it. And even the Gallup survey actually came out with that, is they're no longer looking at, am I loyal to my employees? I'm now looking at, what does my employee add value to me? Do they support me? Do they develop me? Is it a belonging environment? Is there emotional intelligence? They're all of those things, right? Yep. So you cannot sit down and expect nothing to change. Look how much has changed in our world in the last 4 years.
I think you're spot on, Kylie. I mean, one of the things that the new leadership style nowadays is you have to be an all-encompassing leader. You have to understand leadership styles, emotional intelligence, organizational change, strategic management, the planning, the formation and implementation stages. And that's not just confined to financial services organizations. That's across the whole genre. And I think in many different industries, if you don't, then this is where, if you don't do something about it by speaking to people like yourself or Andrew and learning these extra pieces, because it's going to make a massive difference to you, and importantly, the people in the organization who are sacrosanct. They're our customers, whether it's a financial advisor, whether it's the end customer. If you can do that and use your leadership style, and you use the different parts of leadership, the ethical theory, emotional intelligence, then all of a sudden that flows right through the business, even to the end users, the customers, because they see the value and they can see the authentic leadership flowing right through to the individual conversations with the people that they're having on a daily basis, all because of what you've started to set off at the start of this. And it's so much of an exciting journey.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's the foundational part, isn't it? It's getting that bit right in order to get to that North Star, that light on the hill. Tony, I think we have probably hit maximum time, right? I think, and I could just imagine if Andrew was here, he loves a good chat, and I'm sure he probably would have taken another 20 minutes of your time. Thank you so much for the opportunity to hear your thoughts around leadership, how to really create that culture, how to influence that culture through those three very, really important pillars, which is ethical leadership, right? So the ethical theory, doing good for all. And then the second part was around leadership, and then finally EQ as well. So hopefully that allows our listeners to start to think about where are their gaps in each part of those pillars, and then how do they plug those gaps? Because if they're wanting to create a culture that is inspiring, is an employer value proposition, they need to start to think differently and start to think about applying some of those principles. So thank you so much, Tony, for your time.
No problem.
Sorry?
No problem, yeah.
Oh. Have a wonderful day. I know it's only early there in the morning in the UK. I appreciate your time. It's nighttime here in Queensland, Australia. So enjoy your night, our day, and I will speak to you really soon.
Yeah, many thanks, Kylie.